Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. I'm seeing everybody enter into our town hall, so I'm going to give it just a minute until we get started. I'm sure everyone's joining from a variety of devices, from phones, from computers and tablets. If you are able to see our screens, we hope you can look at it because we are going to be sharing some slides that we hope you find helpful. So we'll do our best to talk through, but please do look at your screen if possible. See a few more people joining and we'll just start momentarily. Okay. Thank you all for joining this afternoon. We are glad to be with you. We hope you are healthy and we hope you are safe and we hope you are finding some joy and restoration in whatever form during this difficult time this summer. I'm also really glad this afternoon to be joined by our fearless head of school, Elissa Young, and then the leaders from the Hebrew Public Network to lead us through much of the research and planning we've been doing for the past several months in anticipation of this fall. So I'm going to go over an agenda here of what you can expect. I'll be introducing you to our panel, to our CEO, our COO, our Chief Schools Officer, people who have huge impact in the education and experience your kids receive, but you often don't get to meet them. We'll be doing a bit of a primer on our mission and our work. We are welcoming new and returning families this afternoon. And so for those of you who are returning who know all of this stuff, bear with us. Thank you for your patience. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. We're thrilled to have you. Then we're going to go through our reopening, our process, the research, the directives we've heard, and really the key inputs into making our decisions so far, and then leave time for question and answers. Thank you for many of you who have already submitted questions. We're eager to get to as many of them as possible. And then we will also have an opportunity to answer questions that come up throughout the town hall. So we do ask that you hold off until the end. But you can submit those through the chat function of the Zoom. So you should see that kind of in the lower hand bar of your chat. So that is our agenda for this afternoon. We are also recording the session. So if we're speaking too quickly or you're missing anything, have no fear, this is being recorded as well. So I'm pleased to introduce you this afternoon to John Rosenberg, who is our president and CEO of the network that oversees and manages schools in New York City and then an affiliate network across the country. Welcome, John. You'll be hearing lots from John this afternoon. Emily Fernandez is our Chief Schools Officer. Emily fearlessly joined us last year. We feel very blessed to have her with us, and so she'll be walking us through much of the programmatic components. And then Jonathan Worley is our Chief Operating Officer at the network. Jonathan will be leading us through a lot of this health and safety plans. And of course, Ms. Young, Elissa Young, your head of school, will also be here this afternoon. So I'm going to hand it off now to John Rosenberg to give our new families joining us a bit of a reminder of who we are and the work that we're called here to do.
Emily, thank you. Let me start actually by just saying to all of you on the call and the Zoom meeting with us today that I hope that you and your families and loved ones and friends are healthy and safe. We are obviously living through a uniquely difficult time as a city, as families, as a country, as a world right now, and everything that we've been trying to do is focused on trying to ensure that you and your children and our hardworking staff are well served and safe during this time. But we did want to just take a brief step back on this call and spend a couple of minutes making sure that everyone's aligned around the mission and values that guide our work. So even in a non-pandemic time, our schools are really focused on serving children from all backgrounds, helping them to become what we call global citizens who, as you'll see when we talk about the values, are empathetic, are skilled communicators, are themselves able to communicate across lines of difference and are great problem solvers, and that they learn and grow together in schools that really become communities that embrace diversity. That's particularly important now at a time of such challenges in our world and in our country. And we have done a lot of work in the last year to take that concept of global citizenship and incorporate it into a set of organizational values. Since our schools focus on the teaching of modern Hebrew, we chose a Hebrew word, olam, the word for world, to express those values. And those values are outstanding problem solvers, lifelong learners, aware communicators, and collectively through those three things, really making a difference in their societies through their actions. What's important about this value set is it is not just what we aspire to for the children, your children, who we serve, but it's also what we ourselves are governed by. These are the values that guide individual staff members, that guide the way staff members engage with each other, with families, and with children. And also, these are the values that drive our organizations. And we have been guided by them during these times as we think about how to balance issues of safety and children and family need to ensure a reopening that is as responsible and as effective as we can possibly make it. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand it back to Emily to just walk us through some of the recent history so everyone, including families that are new to us, have an understanding of what the last few months have meant for Philadelphia Hebrew Public.
Thank you, John. And I'll start. So I'm the executive director, which I realized I missed in those introductions, but really I'm glad to hand this section off to Elissa Young, our head of school. She did tremendous work with our team in a memorable founding year, to say the least. So Elissa, if you would take over right now, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so for those of you who I have not yet had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Elissa Young, and I have the deep honor of being the founding head of school at Philadelphia Hebrew Public. And it is so wonderful to see so many of your names here that were our founding families with us this past year. But for families who are new to our community, we wanted to be able to share with you at a really high level our approach and priorities that we've gone through during the many phases of this pandemic. And certainly, as Emily shared, what a ride we've been on in our founding year. And again, I am so deeply proud of the work that Emily alluded to that our team has done and what we've been able to develop in this very short spring. So as many of you know and experienced during school closure, we offered a remote learning plan that was flexible and provided the opportunity for students and families to join us in live instruction each day from 9 to 3, and also providing the opportunities for asynchronous learning through a platform that we use called Seesaw. For students with IEPs, we were also able to maintain support through case management services, academic intervention support, and the continued provision of related services. Again, our high level, our priorities during remote learning were to first maintain social emotional connection. We wanted our kids to still be able to feel community, and then also provide structure to students and families during a time of such uncertainty. Second, we wanted to ensure that students maintained academic progress during closure and really pushed to continue to learn, and our teachers stamped really essential skills and concepts that we wanted our kids to leave with at the end of this academic year. And then third, we wanted to be a resource for families to help weather this crisis of school closure. And so we were really able to work toward these priorities and goals as a direct result of how quickly our teaching and operations team were able to learn and navigate online instruction. And we hope that our scaffolded rollout to families made our program as accessible as possible. We learned a lot this spring and in our current summer programming. So thanks to many of you who are participating with us this year. Our work this summer is also supporting and informing our model that we will be using in the fall. So now I'm pleased to turn it back over to John Rosenberg to lead you through our reopening planning approach for the upcoming school year.
Thank you, Elissa. We have had a large number of network and school staff really focused on ensuring that reopening can happen, as I mentioned earlier, in ways that are responsible. And in doing so, we've been focused on three overriding concerns. The first is health and safety, making decisions that are based on the most current available health and safety research to ensure the safety of your children, of our families, and of our staff members and their families. Second, that there are meaningful opportunities for the families that we serve to provide feedback and input through sessions such as this, through the survey that we've conducted, and through additional information that we'll be gathering from you over the course of the summer. And doing this in a way both so that we can try to meet the greatest areas of need that are common across the largest number of families, but also to ensure that individual family needs and individual child needs are addressed as best we can. Finally, because we are operating in a landscape that doesn't just include us, there are local, Philadelphia-based and state Pennsylvania-based directives and guidelines. Some of them are recommendations and suggestions. Some of them are mandates that we are looking closely at. And of course, where there are requirements that we will ensure that we comply with so that we're abiding by the best recommendations and requirements that government is providing. In addition to our own team's effort, we are working with partner organizations across the public school sector and the charter sector, with experts in health and in areas such as HVAC, ventilation, and the like, to address, as you will hear, a range of efforts that we're undertaking to address safety and health concerns. One of the things that has been helpful in the Pennsylvania context is a study that was commissioned by the state from the Mid-Atlantic Regional Education Laboratory. This study, which is available to members of the public, is highly detailed and synthesized the extent of research out there on issues relating from viral spread, the relative degrees of vulnerability of different populations, social distancing guidelines, and a host of other areas to emerge with a set of recommendations about how best to ensure the opportunity to reopen. And in synthesizing those key findings, there are a few things that I want to emphasize. The first is that children are at low risk compared with adults, especially as compared with older adults and those with certain health conditions, whether those are autoimmune deficiencies, diabetes, a range of other health conditions that have an unfortunate association with less good outcomes for folks who catch the coronavirus. So children are comparatively at low risk. Secondly, there is a sense, not yet confirmed, that children may be less likely to spread the virus to other people. And finally, in terms of key findings, that viral transmission is more common in the following circumstances: indoors, where spaces have more people in them, and where there are issues of ventilation, poor ventilation, and people are in each other's presence for a longer period of time. Again, I'm going to repeat that slowly. So viral transmission is more common indoors, especially if it's crowded, if there's not a lot of airflow, and if people are with each other for a long period of time. You can be indoors and be less likely to catch it, certainly in a larger space or a space with fewer people or a space that's well ventilated, or if that indoor co-location is for a very limited duration. For us, this has led to our synthesizing those findings into a set of recommendations that are not unique to what we are hoping to do for Philadelphia Hebrew Public. These recommendations are consistent with what most thoughtful, careful public school organizations are proposing. The first is that in order to minimize both the number of people who are coming into contact with each other in a school setting, and to ensure that they can be socially distanced from each other, spaced sufficiently apart from each other in those settings, that children should be batched in smaller groups. So what this means is that if in the past we would have had a class of 25 or 26 or 27 children together in a single classroom over the course of a day, that instead we would be serving typically half of that number in a classroom on a given day. This allows, again, for social distancing and limits the amount of contact that children have with larger groups of people. Flowing from that is that given the space that is available in our school and in most public schools, and given the number of staff members who are available in our school and in the overwhelming majority of public schools, is that you cannot safely serve the entire student population every day. What we and others are planning for, therefore, is what's called a hybrid model, in which only a portion of the school's students, approximately half, are in the school building on a given day. Now, that's not the full extent, or even close to the full extent, of the safety measures that we are currently planning. And you'll hear more about these a little bit later on in today's presentation. But we are also looking at mask wearing, increased time outdoors, enhancement of building ventilation systems, intensive cleaning of surfaces and rooms, health screening of students, staff, and visitors, primarily through checking for symptoms and temperature taking. This is just a partial list, and the development of protocols around all of this and our efforts to continue to inform the community and get the community's input on these measures are a huge part of what we're focused on this summer. In June, we surveyed families across our network of schools that Hebrew Public, my organization, helps to manage. That includes Philadelphia Hebrew Public and its three sister schools in New York City. We had nearly 600 families respond to that survey, over 100 of them from Philadelphia Hebrew Public, and offered people the opportunity to weigh in on their preferences around different models for instruction in a hybrid context. Some people preferred an every other day model, some an every other week model, some a model where their children would be home initially all the time. No one, not a single one of these models was the choice of all families. Families fell across all three in terms of their preference across these options, but with the every other day option being the most commonly preferred among the three. And I should say, we know that all of these options are far from ideal. We are living in a context where there are no perfect options, no way to bring all children in safely every day, at least as things currently stand with respect to the pandemic. So this is about choosing the best option among ones that we all know in a typical year, in a prior year, would not be the way we would choose to serve your children. Some of the common themes that parents expressed concerns about were around what kind of routine children would have both in school in terms of things like breaks and outdoor time and the like, and how effective the remote learning days that would be part of the model would be for children. We certainly heard concerns about a hybrid model where children are not in school every day and what that means for working families who might not have school-age childcare for their children on the days when they have to be at a place of work. And we heard certainly parents and guardians with concerns about whether in-person schooling could be safe at all and whether it would be required. So based on that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Emily Fernandez, again, our Chief Schools Officer for the network, to talk a little bit about the model that we're currently developing for the first quarter of the school year. Emily?
Great, thank you, John. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here to talk with you about our planning and to share with you where we're at currently. So as John described, we are landing on a hybrid model or a blended model where students would spend some time in the school building learning in person and some time at home learning at home with our remote learning program. And so this graphic is to represent what that would look like. And so if we follow just one group of kids, let's take the red group. If you look on Monday and Tuesday, our red group, our group A, they would be in school learning in the building for Monday and Tuesday. On Wednesday, they would be home, as would all students. They would have some remote learning, live instruction from their teachers online, synchronous. Staff would do trainings and preparation for the week to come, video recording, grading and giving feedback. And we would do a deep clean of the building in between cohort A, our red group, and cohort B, our blue group, coming in. After that, on Thursday and Friday, our red group would stay home and continue with their remote learning program. And I'll talk a little bit about what that's what we're aiming for in the next slides. And the blue group now would come in. So they would come in for Thursday and Friday for in-person learning. So whichever group students are in, and we would divide them, the students who are coming into the building, in half, right? Half of our students about coming in for 2 days, Monday and Tuesday, the other half coming in for Tuesdays, Thursday and Friday. Every student would have 2 days in the building for in-person learning, and they would have 3 days at home with the remote learning program. Take us to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about what the in-person learning would be. And one thing I'll note before that, and we'll get into timeline a little bit further down, but in deciding those cohorts of cohort A or cohort B, we would be really strategic. We're going to be very intentional around making sure that any siblings are within the same cohort. So for example, if a family had a child in kindergarten and a child in 2nd grade, they're not going to have kids come in on Monday and Tuesday and then another kid come in on Thursday and Friday. We would make sure that siblings were grouped together. And we'll go through a little bit about when we would be able to communicate that coming up. So our in-person learning, this is for the 2 days that students are in the building. Just as John was saying, we would have a smaller group, right? No more than 15 students per classroom. And we've actually done a walkthrough. Emily Hurst and Alyssa and the team have done a walk through the full building, measuring out, making sure for each classroom, the maximum number of students we could put in there in a given classroom while keeping safety and social distancing in effect. So students would have individual desks, personalized learning materials. We think of supplies, if you can picture a kindergarten classroom with baskets full of crayons that everyone is using. We will not be doing that this year. We will be in an individualized place so that even if kids are in the same class, they're not using the same supplies and touching each other's items. We would also really work to have limited interactions between classrooms. So 2 classrooms that are next door to each other would not go to recess at the same time or go to the cafeteria for lunch all together with a grade. We know that movement across the building and interacting with other cohorts, even inside the in-person learning, just increases exposure. And so we'd be trying to limit that as much as possible. Our school hours might be slightly shorter, slightly different. We're going to talk a bit about that when it comes into busing and what we know from the city so far. But in order to account for a socially distant arrival and dismissal and providing support for our remote students, because even when our students are not in the school building, we want to make sure that we're providing a solid remote learning program, and our teachers are going to be responsible for that as well. And then, as with everything we've done over the spring and everything that we're committed to, both legally but also just morally and philosophically, our special education, our English language learner services, all of the academic supports for all of our kids, both mandated and at risk, would continue, and they would be implemented and monitored very closely so that we can see the efficacy of that in these new structures. That's in person. I want to switch to remote learning. So these are the days when your students are at home. Either if they're in person Monday and Tuesday, this is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And if they're in person Thursday and Friday, this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So remote learning. There would continue to be some live synchronous instruction where there is some touch points of teachers live video teaching to students at home. That was a hallmark of what we were able to do this spring. We will not be doing the full live 9 to 3 that we were able to at that point, but we are maintaining some time of live synchronous instruction. We think it's really, really important, and we're working our schedules out to allow for that. There would also be significant asynchronous instruction. So this would be not live in the moment, but it could be pre-taped lessons, assignments that are given really close teacher feedback, our educational learning platforms, and many more ways that we're making sure kids and families are set up to keep learning on these days. These are not days off by any means in our minds in terms of kids growing and learning. So we really are committed to designing a program that allows that. There would be individual student and family support. So some of the family workshops that we were able to do this spring, we're looking at what that could look like in the fall, community building events, and also just individual check-ins for students and families to make sure that they're able to maintain the remote learning at home, so that when they come into the live in-person classes, they're ready to go. And similar to our in-person, again, our special education English language learner services would continuously be implemented and monitored. It's core to who we are to make sure that every kid has access, whether they're remote or in person. So these are some broad strokes about our model, but we wanted to set you up with this starting information before we kind of transition to the next phase.
Thank you, Emily. So we are a citywide public charter school, and as a diverse by design charter school, we draw kids from across the city. And so this past year, we were honored to welcome families from 32 different zip codes, which means families face a host of challenges, as you all know, in terms of transportation and arriving to our schools. And that public busing is a really key component to our model. As a reminder, we do not run public busing ourselves. This is a service provided legally by the School District of Philadelphia. And unfortunately, for new families who are joining us, and we haven't discussed this, busing is not provided by the district for kindergarten students. It's available for students beginning in the first grade and beyond, for families that live 1.5 miles away from the school or further. So as we talk about our remote model, we also wanted to share in real time the information we've received from the School District of Philadelphia of what transportation will look like, because of course we're being quite cautious, as you can see in our model, to minimize contacts between students, as is the district in busing students from across the city. So for families who were on buses last year, we had much smaller buses because we have a smaller school and feel lucky to be in that position right now, but a typical bus can seat 60 or more students. And so that was typical last year. You know, the district is providing buses and sending buses across the city for 60,000 students. Now this year, as they've gone through the current capacity, a bus they have analyzed can only safely accommodate 10 students. And so if you see on this graphic, they will be setting up transportation so that a student is only occupying every other seat and kind of zigzags across the aisle. And a student will not be sitting behind the bus driver as well. Masks will be required on the bus for all students for whom that is safe. There are a couple exemptions at that point. But I wanted to share with you at this point the district's plan around busing to have much smaller buses, deep cleaning between runs, because they're going to have to be running the same buses over and over, and kind of what you can expect. So happy to answer the questions to the best of our ability at this point on busing. But this has had an impact on our planning for next year. And so typically, we decided our start and end times as an independent charter school, and that was written in our charter agreement and approved by our board. Because of the busing constraints, our start time has actually been assigned to us by the School District of Philadelphia because they're having to manage various shifts of busing routes across the city. So while we are still ironing out exactly the details of a staggered arrival, our new general start time will be 8:30 this year instead of 8 a.m. Again, that was assigned to us last week by the School District of Philadelphia, and we'll be doing our best to communicate staggered arrival to make sure that it's as safe as possible. We also know that you are trying to make plans for your family. And so we, to the best of our ability, are trying to communicate with you a high level of dates and timelines to schedule accordingly. So as Emily mentioned, we will be communicating with you kind of the A-B model of the cohort and the assignments by family by mid-August. So our goal is to get you that information by August 14th. So you have a few weeks to kind of adjust. Prior to that, you can expect another survey where we will be requesting information from you around family constraints, technology access and the like, and any additional input on our model. And then our first day of school, we will then be having a new family orientation. So this is not for returning families, but for families who were with us last year. You all remember orientation. For new families, you will have a chance to come into our building on the same AB schedule that week before our first week of school. So you get a sense of our building and our classroom and meet your teacher and a real feel for the procedures. And then our first day of school for cohort A will be on August 31st. That's Monday. So they'll have a Monday, Tuesday in person and the rest of the week remote. And then our first day of school in person for cohort B will be September 3rd, but we'll be starting remote that week as well. So wanted to share a kind of high level of the timeline as they are right now. Additionally, we're doing a lot of work, as we've shared, around health and safety. We are working on detailed plans with your input from these surveys to be submitted both to our Board of Trustees and to the Pennsylvania Department of Education for approval prior to opening. Those will include directives we've received from the state, such as the universal face coverings mandate. So all students who are in schools and all adults who are in schools are mandated by the governor to wear a face covering. But I'm going to hand it over now to Jonathan Worley, the network's Chief Operating Officer, to run through the whole host of other safety and precautionary measures.
Great, thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone. I am Jonathan Worley, as Emily mentioned. I'm the COO at Hebrew Public. I'm just going to take a few minutes now to discuss just some of the planning that we're doing regarding health and safety practices. Some of this has already been touched on, but just going to flesh out a bit of what we're currently thinking. This is all based on our current best information, and it's been informed by a number of inputs, including federal, state, and city guidance, work of some of our peer schools and organizations, research that we've been doing, research that we are reading, collaboration with experts, as John mentioned, including medical and engineering experts, and input from families, of course. All of that said, as things change and as we progress and new studies come out, some of this may change, but this is our current best thinking. So just to quickly run through some of the things we're thinking about. So first, we will be having increased focus on cleaning, of course, and so building cleaning will be more frequent, will be more thorough. We will be conducting advanced disinfection using specialized equipment, which we've ordered for the school. That's going to happen multiple times per week, and there will be a intense focus on high-touch areas and cleaning in between cohorts in particular. We, as mentioned, and as per Philadelphia order, we're going to require that everyone wear masks at all times in school buildings and on buses, and that's going to be students, staff, families, visitors, anyone in the building. We are exploring installing dividers and sneeze guards on student and staff desks just to help contain germ spread as well. There will be restrictions in the building on outside visitors just so we can minimize exposure. So we won't have as many visitors coming in, particularly into the classrooms. Previously, we've had a nurse on site on a part-time basis. We are working currently on extending that to have a full-day nurse on site. We are also, as mentioned, John touched on this, we're exploring multiple strategies around improved air ventilation, air sanitation, and increasing fresh air flow in classrooms. In fact, we're already in conversations with the landlord of the building about how we can most effectively partner with them to make some of those changes for positive impact. In addition, there's going to be enhanced food handling procedures, and as noted earlier, lunches will most likely be eaten in classrooms. We will be focusing on handling procedures that limit person-to-person contact. There will be, as also earlier mentioned, there'll be restrictions on sharing items within the classroom between students and between staff. And we will be reinforcing hand washing throughout the population, students and staff. There will be hand sanitizer stations installed throughout the building. And staff and students will be asked to wash and sanitize multiple times during the day in particular transitions. And then finally, we are doing, as John mentioned, we're doing symptom monitoring, including temperature checks and general symptom monitoring of students and staff to ensure that we can catch anything that might be coming in, and working with the nurse on that as well. That's a high-level review of some of the thinking that we're doing. And again, these things can change as we move along, but that's where we are right now. So now I think we're going to transition to addressing some frequently asked questions that we've already received from some of you. So I'm going to hand things off to John Rosenberg.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it. And thanks to each of you for giving such detail around our plans here. For those of you who are on the line, look, I'm a parent. My son is finishing high school this coming year. My daughter's in college. I don't have young children anymore, but I can remember and can imagine how you all must be feeling and how worrisome this must be. So we're going to do our best to answer some of your questions today. Some of you submitted some questions in advance, which we greatly appreciate. We're going to use the remaining 20 minutes to begin to answer those questions. And I know that we're likely to only scratch the surface of questions that you're going to have over the coming days and weeks. We are going to always be available to answer your questions. If we're not able to get to them today, you can email us. You can reply to the email, do so by replying to the email that was sent out by the Philadelphia Hebrew Public team with respect to this town hall. You can get in touch with school leadership, and we are going to double down on making sure that we are aware communicators with you. And if we don't know the answer, we will tell you that we don't know. If we have an answer that's tentative, we will tell you that. And if we feel certainty about something, we'll tell you that. So we're going to give you as best we can, as much clarity about the things we know. And if there's a lack of clarity, we're working really hard to get clear answers, whether those are from government, from health experts, or others. So let's turn to the first of what has been a common set of questions. The idea of hybrid learning means that there are, as we're currently sketching out this model, 3 days a week when your child or your children would not be in school. We are deeply concerned about the impact that is going to have on families that have to go to a workplace. There has been, frankly, a real absence of leadership at all levels of government in addressing this issue. We are doing the best we can on a few fronts. First, trying to identify neighborhood-based options. As Emily Hurst mentioned, children in Philadelphia Hebrew Public come from all over the city. So we're working to identify neighborhood-based options, for example, a Boys and Girls Club, a Y, a community center, that might be able to pivot towards providing school day, socially distanced, safety procedure following childcare options for children who cannot be home because their parents need to be at work and there's not another responsible adult to look after them. Secondly, we're analyzing the possibility of using the large gym cafeteria in our school as a common space with additional staffing for a limited number of children to come into the school very distanced from each other on a day when they're not supposed to be in school but can't be home due to parent work responsibilities. This is not something we're ready to commit to yet, but we're trying to see if there's a way we can make it work, balancing considerations around staff coverage and children and staff safety. And finally, in response to this question that's coming up a lot around remote learning and parent work obligations, we may be able to provide in-class instruction on additional days of school, 4 days a week perhaps, 3 days a week, maybe in the rare instance 5 days a week, for a very limited number of children based on their particular needs. we can turn to the next question, please. We also know that a number of you are simply uncomfortable with the idea of sending your child back in the fall. You may not feel that way for an entire year, but if you had to gut check on it right now, you may feel that your child is in a higher risk category due to a health condition, or that someone in the household, perhaps a grandparent, perhaps a parent, a brother, a cousin, someone with whom you live or who your child comes into frequent contact with may be in a particularly higher risk category. While we are awaiting clear guidance from the state on this, our current plan is to offer a fully remote option for the first quarter of the year. We would revisit this over the course of the year for families who are really concerned about sending their child back at all at the beginning of the school year. This is a very challenging thing for us to figure out in terms of staffing, because our school's limited number of staff will be providing on-site instruction Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday and Friday to the different halves of the student population. But we are going to do our best to figure out how to provide an effective, fully remote option for those families who really feel that they're not ready to send their child back in the fall. So stay tuned for more details on that. Next slide, please. So one of the questions I think we all have is, how long will this last? How long are we going to be in this crazy, unprecedented, frightening pandemic world? And what does that mean in terms of how long this hybrid model will be in place in our schools, and how long we're going to have all of these enhanced safety procedures? The answer is we don't know. And frankly, no one knows right now. Health experts don't know. We are ready to support this model for the entire school year if we need to. We're also ready to pivot within a day to fully remote instruction if the health conditions change in the city, if, God forbid, there is some kind of an outbreak within our school context or the immediate neighborhood context, if government tells us that we have to. There are any number of situations that might cause us to have to move towards fully remote for a period of time, or that might allow us to actually go back to some semblance of a normal school year where your children are coming to school every day in full classes. And we hope, obviously, that that will be the case and that that will happen sooner than later. If you follow the news, you know that the path this virus is taking, while it is stabilizing in places like Pennsylvania and New York and much of New England, that there are many states around the country that are seeing, as part of their own reopening, a spike in infections. So we are going to monitor the situation closely, follow government mandates, and follow the expertise of experts, professionals in areas such as epidemiology and infectious disease, and make the most responsible set of decisions for your children and for our school community. Again, this current model is something we're planning for the first marking quarter, and we will revisit over the course of that period of time to determine what our next steps are and to communicate those to you. Emily Hurst, let me turn it to you to send some questions our way that are coming in. Sure. So that we can field them.
Absolutely. So hopefully these three questions responded to a couple of the questions we received in advance. But I wanted to go ahead and ask this question. Emily Fernandez, I would love your support in answering Lily Ubben's question. So the question is, I'm concerned about the health of teachers and their feelings. Will there be plans for teachers who are in a vulnerable group? And how will we be supporting our teachers?
Yeah, I so appreciate this question being asked and raised, and it just speaks to me of the value of our teachers, both from our family community and also from us. So we fully share these concerns, and we're working closely with our school leaders and with our staff to manage this. We've done a number of surveys of our staff over the spring. Even as early as the first month that we closed, checking in on staff wellness, what they needed, where they were, where their families were with managing the virus and managing our new work settings and childcare and all of the other things that have come along with it. We continued surveying over the spring, and we are actually scheduling our next staff survey to go out in the next week or so, in which we are going to ask folks who feel comfortable to do so to share any health or circumstantial concerns or risks that they believe they have for themselves with our human resources department, so we can work together to make the appropriate accommodations and make sure that our staff stay healthy and safe. I think anyone who is following this across the country right now is seeing these concerns being raised, and we love our teachers. We could not do what we do without them, and so we're going to prioritize keeping them safe even as we move forward with a hybrid model.
Thank you, Emily. Yep, I certainly echo that. You know, we refer to our teachers and you all as our founding family, and we certainly feel that way. So as we manage and plan to take care of our own families, we look to our team and you as an extension of that. So thank you, Emily, and thank you, Lily, for that really thoughtful question. We had another question around, will kindergarten have full days? And I'm just going to go ahead and answer that. As of now, yes. So certainly with our A, B schedule, on A days, kindergarten will be full day. Again, the length of the day might be modified depending on our staggered arrival and dismissal schedule. And we do need to, unfortunately, plan a little bit more time to manage that, so it won't be as efficient as it was last year, but do plan on a full day in person at this point. So I'm going to turn now to the chat to get some of these. Rachel Doherty asked, and I will pitch this one to John Rosenberg, please. If a child is sick, COVID or otherwise, will they be able to attend remote learning days on days where they would generally be in class?
Rachel, that's a great question. One of the things we're looking at, and this tentative answer may also apply to children whose parents really want them to stay at home and only be involved in remote learning. So I want everyone to understand this is not a guaranteed answer, because we're still in furious and fast and thorough planning about the most effective ways to enable children to participate in a variety of different ways in learning. We're looking into camera technology, audio and visual technology, that would allow a child who is home on a remote learning day because they're ill, because they can't be in school that day, but they would normally be there, to participate via Zoom. So they're not physically in the classroom, but they can see and hear and also be seen and heard almost as though they were there. Obviously, it's not the same as physically being present with a cohort of students, but it is real-time participation. If we are able to implement this, we will be following along a similar line to what many universities are currently planning, which is a lot of post-secondary institutions don't feel they can bring all of the students into a lecture hall, for example, and so some of them might be participating on Zoom, others physically present, and we're looking into similar options that would speak to situations where, for example, a child is homesick.
Thank you, John. Okay, I'm going to switch to Keta. Got a question about uniforms here. So, and I'll go ahead and field this. The question is, since children are attending school 2 times per week in school, will they continue to have to wear uniforms? I don't have the perfect answer to this yet. To be honest, as a team, we have not discussed revising our uniform policy. So at this point, it's still in place, and would love for students to plan on arriving as they would last year. Kramer's is available. They have new stock. They're very eager to support us. And we will be communicating with you if that is revised in any way. Okay. I'm going to send this one to John Rosenberg as well. I have an incoming kindergartner, and I'm concerned about going to a school physically and about remote learning for a 5-year-old. Is there an option to defer a year and keep our spot?
That's an excellent question. So what we typically, under Pennsylvania charter law, I think, we'd have to research this, but I think that in a typical year, you're not able to do that. That is that you'd have to reapply. What we don't know, and what we'll commit to finding out, is whether there will be an exception to the way charter school admission procedures normally work because of COVID, particularly for children who would normally be entering kindergarten. And let me also say, any parent with questions about their own individual circumstance, please feel free to, again, to write to us specifically around questions like this so that we can get you a specific answer. But that is something that we will look into and get back to you very soon about.
Jonathan Worley would love your insight here on Michelle Caleb's question around teachers being required to take a COVID test. So will we require teachers to take a COVID test?
That's a great question, and I don't have a definitive answer on that yet. We are looking into making sure we understand what we are legally allowed to ask, what makes sense to ask. Like COVID test gives you a snapshot in time, so does it make sense for us to even ask that at that specific time? You know, so I unfortunately don't have anything definitive to say about this right now, but I can tell you we are looking into this and we will have answers about this very soon.
If I can also just add a little bit to that, while the legal questions around mandatory testing for all staff are still unclear, we will be implementing a very robust set of procedures around staff members having to identify each day whether they have any symptoms that might be COVID symptoms. Depending on the nature of those symptoms, they may be required to go home. And depending on the nature of their symptoms, including things like whether they have a temperature, for example, they may be required to be tested prior to returning to school. So while mandatory testing for all staff is still something that we're waiting further guidance on, there will be a lot of measures in place to do our best to assess staff health and obviously student health and make appropriate decisions about who should be in the building on a given day.
So there's a question about food service and will we still be serving breakfast? And I am happy to provide some insight into that. So we are still a CEP school, which is a community eligibility provision school, which means that we will provide free breakfast and lunch to all students in our building. So there doesn't need to be any qualifying factor to receive those meals. We will still be providing breakfast and we will be providing lunch. We're working now on our application and shifting actually our vendor structure so all meals are unitized. So rather than serving them and having an additional staff food worker dividing up food, they will actually come pre-packaged and in that way are much more limited in their exposure and safe. And we are also working on variances that we can apply for to see if we can distribute additional food for families for the days on which they're not with us in person. If we cannot do that for any reason, though we are working on the application right now, we are still committed to supporting our families to connect with resources in the community. So we'll also be connecting with you with any local food distribution centers or the like. We know that our kids need fuel, and so healthy meals are part of our educational program as well. Great. I can answer this question too, the color of the uniform. I'm glad I can answer a few questions. So our uniform is a navy shirt. It's either a t-shirt or a polo, and then navy or tan pants. So we hope those are pretty accessible to families. We also, in the past, have had kind of a uniform exchange. If you need that, we do need to revamp that to make sure that it's secure. But we will be posting the uniform policy in the next week, as well as connecting you with Kramer's, which is in North Philly, but has stores across the city, and are now doing online orders as well as like outside pickups, so known contact pickups to facilitate that. Great. Emily Fernandez, I'd love your support here from Stanley Templeman. I have a hard time believing that students will keep masks on. What is the alternative for this potential issue?
Yep. And having a almost 4-year-old son myself, he's not quite in kindergarten or first, but I can relate to the disbelief. So here's where we're at. having a mask on is, from all of the research that we've seen, like a key factor to limiting spread and keeping kids safe, keeping staff safe, keeping our full community safe, right? So we are going to require it. But just like any difficult thing we work with kids to master and to succeed at, we're going to teach and reteach and incentivize and bring joy to. What does it look like to bring joy to wearing a mask, right? For a kindergartner, how do we make that something that they're invested in, the way they treat their mask, the way they care for their community by wearing their mask? And so while we are going to require it, we don't see it as like a simple item that's checked off. We know it's going to actually take pretty intentional training of adults this summer on how to train and support and teach our kids to do that throughout the school year. So it's going to be a challenge. We don't dilute that, but we believe we can do it. And we don't think that there is a safe alternative to it. We know that it has to happen for everyone who's in the community.
And I'll just reiterate that while it has to happen, and we will be supporting it in all of the ways Emily Fernandez just described, it is not the sole measure that we're relying on to reduce risk. So things like sneeze guards, separate desks that are at a significant enough distance from each other, keeping kids again in smaller groups so they're exposed to a smaller number of people, and a focus on ventilation and fresh air and airflow and the like, all additionally will help to reduce risk.
Thank you. So Elissa, if you would support here, Michelle Caleb has a question around standardized testing. How will students be gauged on if they are on level or not, especially with this remote instruction model as well for some students?
Yeah. So this is a great question. We are still in the process of mapping out some of these dates, but we do intend to move forward with some of the assessments that you are accustomed to seeing. So for example, to assess students' reading, they are given the opportunity to read a book with their teacher, and the teacher is able to have a conversation with them about that to assess not only their accuracy in reading and their ability to decode words, but also their understanding of reading. So assessments like that can still take place. You know, I think for us, the impact will be on our calendar and how long assessment windows are open. So for those of you who have seen this past year's school calendar, you will see kind of color coding of a days past 2 weeks. And that does not mean that kids are taking a test every day, but it means that we're assessing during that window. We will likely be extending those windows to make sure that we have enough time to provide kids with those assessments. We are also really fortunate that one of the main assessment tools we use is MAP, which is a computer-based assessment that kids already, our students from this past year are already accustomed with, that will give us data on each child's individual levels and also provide us with data around their individual learning trajectories. And so that is another assessment that we will continue to lean on.
Thank you. So we are almost at time, so I'm going to do a rapid fire best effort at answering a few more remaining questions and then let you know what's to come. So lunch will happen in the classroom. We will not be mixing students in the cafeteria. We will be bringing unitized lunches to the classroom to maintain safety as much as possible. We will have a staggered schedule in the morning. I can't tell you exactly what that will be, but there will be extensive procedures on how to arrive and maintain a physical distance as you come in. So be on the lookout for what's to come there. We also have a question around technology. So our model has changed, and now having a computer is essential to engaging with our model, and so we are committed to providing that for you. So we've been both doing fundraising and applying for a number of the federal CARES Act funds to be able to supply one-on-one technology for families who need it. So that's our commitment. We're also working with the city and with current internet providers to make sure that you have, to the best of our ability, access to reliable internet. I know there are a number of other questions here, so what we are going to do is we are going to write them all down, and we're going to get back to you either individually or where it's applicable to everyone, to the full group. And so what you can expect from us is a written communication with a summary of everything we've talked about, answering additional questions as well. We will also be sending an additional survey by the end of July. So by July 31st, you can look out for a survey that will ask you some of the key questions, including access to internet and technology, that will inform our assignments and design for the upcoming school year. And then we will have another town hall. So on August 11th, we will have another town hall where we will share updates to our plan, specifically anything additional directives that come out from the state, and give another opportunity to answer questions. So we are so grateful you've joined us. It's already 5:01. Thank you for your patience. Thank you to the team for your support here. And do be in touch. Please feel free to respond to info@Philadelphia Hebrew Public if further questions come up as we sign off. Thank you.